Hi, and welcome to the Airline Weekly Lounge live stream. I'm your host, Madhuni Krishnan, the editor of Airline Weekly, and I'm joined today by Julie Kyse, Vice President Vice President for Global Air Partnerships for Expedia Group. Good morning, Julie.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, it's our pleasure. So before we get started, I want to let all our listeners know they can ask questions as we'll take them as they come in using the Q&A function in the webinar box. We will be posting a video replay of this live stream later today on airlineweekly.com. And the audio podcast will be available later this week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. And as a reminder, this is our last podcast of the year. Julie, thanks for joining on the last podcast of the year. We will pick up the live stream again early next year. This also is the last, today was the last issue of Airline Weekly for the year. The next issue will be dated January 11th, and we want to wish everyone a very happy and healthy holiday season in this most tumultuous of years. And here's hoping for a better 2021. Julie, once again, thank you for joining us.
Pleased to be here.
So, the Airline Weekly Lounge live stream, as you can probably imagine from its name, is mainly listened to by folks in the airline and airport industries. So Expedia is, I'm thrilled to have someone from Expedia. You're the first sort of OTA or travel company executive we've had on the live stream, so I'm thrilled to have you on, but it is a little bit outside our wheelhouse, and I just, I think, this would be really great for our listeners to hear your perspective on air travel and the recovery. And so I wanted to get started with talking about sort of Expedia as a technology company. I mean, Expedia collects a huge amount of data. And I wanted to ask you first, like, what role do you see technology playing in the restart of global air travel?
Yeah, I think technology has a really important role to play in the restart, especially as we've seen airlines reduce their headcount, as we've seen them focus on other things, as their financial situation is still relatively unstable. We can be in a position to help them by driving demand and to remove friction from the traveler experience through that. So
when you say removing friction, what can you go, I mean,
sure.
We're talking to airline nerds here.
Yeah, so one of the things that all these airlines know is that they've got a lot of outstanding credits. Millions of them are sitting with consumers. So on our leisure side, we've invested in technology where our virtual agent platform will allow customers to come in and redeem those credits in a really painless way, which is really important for those customers who are maybe less frequent travelers. And by doing that through technology, it reduces the calls to the call centers for the airlines who don't really have the resources to manage to the same extent that they did before. It reduces calls to our call center, and it just makes it a much more, I don't want to say pleasurable, but it's a frictionless experience for the customer to redeem that credit and to get back in the air. On the corporate side too, you think about travel managers, and while you and I might have 3 or 4 travel credits apiece, a travel manager might have thousands of credits for their clients. And so we've created technology to help them manage those credits in the future and to redeem them when their travelers are ready to fly again, and to understand how much that opportunity exists for them. So there's a few other ways technology is really important, and one of them is around the change fees. So as you know, many of these airlines have gone to no change fees for standard economy tickets in the future. Right. But actually right now, there's no change fees for almost any ticket because everything is travel with confidence. You can get a credit if you're not ready to travel, et cetera. So what we've done is we've implemented filters and badging on our sites to make sure that customers know that. And when airlines, as part of recovery, revert to basic economy being non-refundable, then we're going to be in a position to also show customers what they get if they upsell into a standard economy. So that's going to enable a faster recovery for airlines who'll be able to yield at a better rate.
Okay. Now let's talk about data. I mean, a company like Expedia. So let me preface this. A few months ago, I was speaking to an executive at AirAsia who said something that is painfully obvious once she said it, but was something I'd never really thought about. In my head, usually wrapped around chasm and rasm. And that's, AirAsia is transforming itself into sort of a data platform or a travel platform because they collect so much data from passengers. Expedia, this is AirAsia writ large. I mean, Expedia collects reams and reams of data from all its users. And so, how do you deploy that data to sort of restart the airline industry and facilitate the return of global travel?
Well, one of the things that we do for our airline partners is we have a self-service portal where they can go in and track their own airline's performance on Expedia sites. They can see what their market share is relative to their competitors. They can see what their prices are relative to their aggregated competitors so that they can figure out, are they competitive or not? These types of tools are super intuitive, easy for them to use. We've made them available to revenue managers at our airline partners, to our day-to-day commercial teams, our sales teams, et cetera, so that they can make good decisions about what we're seeing in the Expedia store. We also, during the course of the pandemic, we shared with several partners lodging information. So as we started to see lodging, particularly vacation rentals, which is one of the first areas of the travel industry to be bumped up, we were able to indicate to airlines, this is where demand might be coming from. And several of our airline partners utilize that data to look at their network development decisions. Do they want to stand down flights, or do they want to bring them up? So the more that we can provide information about demand and where customers are searching, the more that can inform our airline partners. The reality is, if you're a revenue management professional today, everything you used to do, all of your conventional wisdom, all of your historical data, it doesn't matter, because this is a brand new world we're in. And so the more you can get data from different sources, different partnerships, like with Expedia Group, who have, we work with 500 different airlines. And so we've got a lot of insight as to what not just your customers are doing, but what your potential customers are doing. That's going to be particularly valuable as airlines look to come out of this.
Interesting. So you take the data that you collect on search, on booking trends, and you send that to your air partners, correct?
Yeah, we make that available to them through our partners' central tools.
Okay. And so what are some of the trends you are seeing right now?
So we're seeing on the leisure side, on the domestic side, travelers are searching. It's kind of inconsistent, to be honest with you. It goes up and down. We see that when there's good news about things like vaccines, we suddenly will see a big spike in searches, especially to international destinations. Because the thing about this news around the vaccines is it really seems to light a fire of anticipation. There's so much pent up demand. We see when Hawaii opened, even I guess conditionally with the testing requirements, we saw people rush in. 8,000 people went to Hawaii on the first day that they were able to. In Cancun, when Mexico was first opened, they had such a record-breaking day that first weekend that they reopened a terminal. So the demand is there. The dream isn't dying. 1 in 2 people in our survey we've surveyed said that they want to travel again. And so there's a tremendous desire for it. And people never stop dreaming, even at the lowest point of the pandemic, when global air travel was 95% down. People were still searching and still looking and dreaming of their next trip.
So, I saw that news that Expedia put out in the last couple of days about 1 in 2 people or say they want to travel the next 12 months. The question I have, and I've spoken to some European airlines that say we're not seeing a lot of demand close in. We're seeing people search and look for trips next summer. Are you seeing similar trends?
We are seeing some trends for next summer, particularly, but the people who are booking do tend to book in much closer at this point.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right.
To try to get ahead of whatever restrictions, whatever lockdowns might happen, is they're waiting until the last minute. And the thing is that right at this moment, you can get pretty decent prices, even if you book kind of late in the game, because the demand just hasn't been there as much. Not recommended for holiday periods or anything like that. But if you're traveling in mid-January, there's probably going to be some really good deals out there, even if you book late.
And are you seeing sort of, are there trends, sort of, let's break it down by geography. Where are you seeing the most activity for search?
Yeah, I think that what we see is primarily in the domestic markets. So, we're a global company. And
Hmm.
when we talk about domestic, when I say domestic, I mean France domestic, US domestic. A lot of the US never really closed down to the same extent that Europe did during the initial lockdowns. People were still traveling to a much lesser degree in the US. So, we are seeing still a lot of interest in domestic, or in places like Europe, short haul,
Right.
intra-regional. People aren't necessarily taking those really long holidays from the US to Asia. But interestingly enough, one of the destinations that popped up as a highly searched destination for the US was the Maldives. So
Ah,
uh,
that
I,
is,
I guess people are dreaming big.
yeah, yeah. That's very interesting.
I dream of the Maldives, so I don't
I
blame
know.
them, honestly.
Yeah, I don't. Who can I keep dreaming of places like the Maldives and French Polynesia? Um, in terms of demographics, I mean, in the prep for this, before we went live, you and I were speaking a little bit about some of the demographic differences you've seen, or some of the things you've gleaned from your air partners on
Yeah.
the changing passenger mix.
So one of the really interesting things is that because it's so skewed towards leisure, the percentage of people who have a frequent flyer card has gone down significantly. So
Right.
airlines are either going to try to get more people to sign up for their frequent flyer programs who are flying right now, or they're going to have to figure out different ways to market to those customers. One of them is a little self-serving plug here, through OTAs, by having your best inventory and your best rates available for OTAs, so that people can see them when they're willing to travel, because they're not necessarily loyalists who,
Hmm.
I always fly such and such an airline. This is a new target. The leisure customer is a little bit more brand agnostic.
Yeah, so that I was speaking to someone at American a few weeks ago about this very issue, about how they've had to pivot some of their marketing to mainly younger people or first time flyers, who are sort of the young invincibles, I think you call them,
Yeah.
that are traveling now, right?
Yes.
These aren't your road warriors who have, you know, brand loyalty, et cetera. But how does an OTA, I get how an airline would pivot its marketing. How does an OTA aid in that effort, or sort of augment the airline's marketing and targeting these new travelers?
Well, there's a lot of ways that we're trying to do that. One of the things, if you watch US American TV, is you probably see that all of our brands, Expedia, Hotels.com,
Mhm.
and Verbo, we're advertising broadly on the TV. So we're trying to keep that dream, that wanderlust alive. We have other supporting marketing vehicles, like podcasts of our own, where we try to encourage people who are willing to travel. We know that it's not for everybody. Not everybody's going to feel comfortable. I took a flight. I'm not I don't think my asthmatic mother is probably going to take a flight anytime soon, but that's okay. We want people to travel when and where they feel comfortable to do
Mhm.
so. And there are people who are starting to do that, and more will happen over time.
Right. So that is, I'm going to like branch off a little bit here, and uh, and talk about, how do you make people more comfortable to travel? What do you do to
Yeah.
build on that confidence?
Yeah, that's a big one. And I think, first of all, like I said, I flew recently, and it was the first time since February. And it's a big psychological hurdle to take
Yeah.
that very first flight after all of this. I was greatly comforted by what I think is very compelling science about safety on board the aircraft. The airlines have done a good job of getting the preconceived notion that air is recirculated within aircraft, and so therefore it's very germy. That's actually the exact opposite of what happens with the
Right.
HIPAA filters. And so they've done a good job with that. We need to do more. We need to work as an industry to make sure that people understand that. One of the other things that we've done within our own site is to highlight those health and safety features that the airlines have, that they're promoting. And one of the interesting things is that people are interacting with the health and safety as much with that filter as much as any other filter on the site, including nonstop, which is our
Oh,
traditional biggest filter. So
right.
there's a keen interest in people understanding that. When we had when most of the airlines were offering blocked seats, and that's the blocked middle seats,
Hmm.
it's kind of starting to wind down now. But we were seeing that those airlines who had those blocked middle seats were securing a premium for that.
Interesting.
So this is an important thing, and customers are willing to pay a little bit more. I know on my flight, I splurged. I bought a first class ticket because I was like, all right, fewer people walking past me. I can board last and I can get off first. And so I think that people are going to be willing to put their money where their mouth is as far as safety and security is concerned.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You're sort of you brought to life something I heard recently on the Lufthansa's earnings call, and Carsten Spohr said they're seeing a lot more leisure travelers in first and business class, which is a remarkable difference from the before times. Right.
And, I mean, it's affordable. So if
Yeah.
you have the means and you're traveling, it's definitely something I encourage people to look at, the premium cost. On my particular flight, it was a schedule change and it got downgraded to an RJ. And usually in days past, I'd be really upset about that. But I was like,
Right.
oh, cool. There's the one seat on the side, it's great.
That's funny. Um, you're seeing a lot of people interact with the health and safety filter. What other trends are you seeing from that? The health, besides middle seats, what other things are trends have come out of that?
So, there's a lot about the cleanliness of the aircraft. And I can tell you, as a 25-year veteran of the business, I've never seen airplanes and airports as clean as I did last week.
Right.
And I hope that that's a trend that continues well past the pandemic, frankly.
Right.
But there's also pros and cons to it. One of the other things I observed is that they had a drink service, but they handed it out a small bottle of water and some Biscoff in a Ziploc baggie. And at the end of the flight, the Ziploc baggie gets thrown away. So what we need to do as an industry is make sure that all the work we've done on sustainability, it doesn't go the wayside. It's obviously necessary for now to have all these single-use plastics,
Right.
but my hope is that we'll get more momentum on that. So there's pros and cons to these safety measures. It makes you feel reassured, but then on the other hand, you're like, oh, one step forward, two step back as far
Right.
as the environmental concerns are.
Yeah, well, I hope that is a temporary thing. I mean, one of the things, I've talked to a bunch of people in the industry who said the cleanliness is probably here to stay, and which is good, right? Touchless that's here to stay, like all the touchless sort of.
Which is great, because who wanted to touch those screens before
Right,
anyway?
I know. Be interesting, biometrics, and we'll see how that plays out. But if biometrics can make the screening process faster, just going forward, that's definitely one positive that will come out of this.
I think the other thing that's really positive, and we found it within our own business as well, is that when faced with an adversity like this, how fast things can be delivered. Because usually airlines move a little slower as far as innovation and new technology, but the speed at which they got the touchless technology out and deployed, the speed at which they changed their cleaning, that's tremendous. And I think that hopefully we won't, as an industry, revert back to old behaviors in the future, and we'll just keep that momentum going very strong.
Now, I wanted, so there's been a lot of talk about the leisure traveler and how that market is coming back faster. You mentioned domestic people dreaming big for their vacation to the Maldives, etc. There's been a lot of doom and gloom about business travel. Corporate travel. I mean, a lot of companies right now are simply not sending employees out on the road for liability reasons, or for various reasons, keeping their employees safe. And you hear people say, now I'm old enough to remember when email was going to kill corporate travel. I'm even old enough to remember when the fax machine was going to kill corporate travel.
Yep.
Just barely. There's mixed. I mean, I heard I did an interview with Ed Bastian a few months ago, and he said there's a segment of that business that is just gone.
Yeah.
But then Scott Kirby said, the first person to lose a sale because it was a Zoom meeting rather than an in-person meeting, that's the end of Zoom, right? So I'm just trying. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of corporate travel now?
Well, right now, you're right. There's very little of it. Where there is corporate travel, we're seeing it from the small to medium enterprises. So Expedia Group has a TMC, travel management company,
Uh-huh.
as part of it called Agencia. And our footprint is kind of hybrid. We have some big companies, and then we also have a lot of small to medium enterprises, which is one thing that the airlines really value from us, because it's not business that they can typically go after themselves.
Mhm.
But they're the ones who are traveling, and it makes sense, right? If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a growing business, you have to get in front of your clients. You have
Yeah.
to be always hustling, and so that's the segment that it's come back the quickest. And probably there's fewer concerns at that level with liability, because there's smaller enterprises. Sometimes there's single proprietor, or the
Mhm.
owner who's doing the traveling. So we're seeing more of that. We're seeing some of the bigger companies where they're like energy companies or healthcare companies, but generally speaking, it's the foot soldiers, the folks who are
Right.
going to work on oil rigs. It's not the executive white collar folks who work for these big companies that are doing the travel yet. And a lot of this is tied to what I think Festive Road is a consultancy that calls it permissible travel.
Hmm.
And it's all about how do you restart travel in a way that is safe, but the company has a lot of control over who goes where. And so a lot of the investments we've been making have been around approval processes and adding in particular exclusions for more locations, perhaps having two-level approvals before people can fly.
Oh,
So there's a lot of that. The travel managers are actually looking to add a little bit more friction into it so that they can restart their programs in a safe fashion.
right.
Um, my personal view is that it will come back. It will be a lot slower, but this is fine. Podcasting over Zoom that makes perfect sense. The Skift Forum, the Expedia Group conference, it's just not the same when you don't
Right.
get together. You don't have the opportunities for networking, meetings. You can't have those side conversations in the hallway that are so
Right.
productive.
Yeah.
So I genuinely believe in business travel as an impetus for growth, and so I do think it will come back.
What are your predictions if you had to look into your crystal ball? What are your predictions for corporate travel next year?
I think one of the big things that's holding back corporate travel as well is return to office. So
Mhm.
as we see more and more people coming back to offices, then we'll have more and more reasons to travel. And so I would think that would be a key indicator for when corporate business is going to come back, when you see people widely back in offices.
Huh. All right. So we're thinking the middle to second to third quarter of next year.
Yeah, it's hard to
Right.
predict. I think leisure is going to recover much, much faster, but corporate will come back. I think IATA's got some very pessimistic views
Yeah.
that it's 3-4 years down the road, and maybe that's true for it coming back at the full level it was, but it will come back. I don't believe that Zoom is the end of corporate travel at all.
Yeah. Well, email wasn't right.
No.
So
And frankly, Zoom has existed for some time
that's
up
true.
to now. So
Yeah.
it's not like it's a brand new concept, this video conferencing.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a tool we're all using more now, but it has existed for years. I mean, we've all
Yeah,
FaceTimed with our moms, right? So
exactly.
well, when she can figure out how to use it, that is. But that is interesting to hear what you are thinking about corporate travel, because it's just there is a lot of doom and gloom. I mean, you're right. IATA says 2024. I think Lufthansa said 2025. I mean, it's definitely going to vary by region, right?
Yeah.
Delta, Ed Bastian told me he doesn't know where IATA is getting its numbers, because he thinks it'll be earlier than that. So there's just a lot of regional variety in this. I guess in the time we have left, I wanted to ask you just really quickly about where where we talked about consumer confidence a minute ago, but just what do you think it'll take to make people go back to the travel again? Is it the vaccine? Is it when do you think this pent up demand we're hearing about will just burst forth?
Yeah. The vaccine is certainly helpful, and it definitely is, it unlocks the feeling of possibility amongst people. Obviously, there's a lot of logistics in getting that vaccine out. There'll be a lot of work with governments and other entities to get borders open and to get quarantine requirements
Mhm.
lifted. And so I think there's still going to be a lot of work before the gates are fully unleashed. But we
Mhm.
know that there are people who are lined up at those gates, like we saw with Hawaii, like we saw with Mexico. I think I just heard that the UK opened it up to Canary Islands.
Yeah.
So I would
And
expect
bookings
a
went
lot of,
up as right.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So it's almost like if you build it, they will come. Um, people are people are dying to get out of their houses, honestly. I mean, I live in
Yeah.
Miami and I'm so sick of Miami.
Something I never thought
All my
anyone would say.
business associates are like, oh, when this opens up, we'll come for a meeting in Miami. I'm like, no,
No.
no, because I have to go somewhere.
Right.
So
It's interesting.
people, there is this strong desire by humankind to move around. And hopefully in the future, what we'll do is we'll move around with purpose and with gratitude because we know what we've missed, and we'll be really grateful for the opportunity to do it.
All right. And I guess my final question, I lied earlier. Um, where, what, how is Expedia positioning itself to capture that resurgence in travel?
Yeah, I mean, what we're doing is really working to use our technology to transform and to remove those barriers, to make sure that people can make informed choices as borders open and they decide they're ready to go, that they have the information about the health and safety, about flexibility, to get them access to great prices. So working with our partners to make sure that they know where that demand's coming from so that they can match it. Lining up hotels and air together to build packages that are going to be compelling for people. Um, all of that, plus the work that we're doing on the corporate side to help our travel managers as they reboot their travel
Mhm.
programs, to give them those insights as well. All of this, I think, is supportive of the industry as a whole recovering. And 2001 after September 11th, 2008 after the economic crisis, airlines really were able to lean on OTAs, and I
Mhm.
fully expect that to be the case this time, and for us to really work in partnership to do that.
Interesting. Well, Julie Kyse, I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
It's my
Hope
pleasure.
I hope we can do this live stream in person someday.
I do too. I look forward to that.
And to our listeners, as I said, the the video replay of this will be available later on airlineweekly.com. The audio podcast will be distributed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. This is our last live stream of the year. So, Julie, thank you so much for joining us for the final 2020 podcast. I know this is not the year anyone wants to celebrate, but I want to thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, and happy New Year, and goodbye to 2020.
Goodbye to 2020. And to our subscribers, today's issue was the last issue of the year. The next issue will be dated January 11th. So we will see you in the next year, in the new year. Happy holidays to everyone. Stay healthy, and we'll talk to you in 2021. Goodbye.